Hello.
Let's get started. First, I'd like to thank God. Obviously, all glory to God. I thank my parents for not only just exemplifying godly marriage to me every day, but raising me and supporting me through this wonderful time. Thank you to my rhetoric teachers, Mr. Worley and Miss Harwood, for providing constant guidance throughout this thesis process. Thank you to my advisors, Abby Langub and Jessica Salazar, for providing deep dating insight. And lastly, thank you all for coming to my thesis. Okay, are we ready? Okay, I hope you are. 10 things I hate about you. The kissing booth, XO Kitty, and the certified classic High School Musical. Society's obsession with high school relationships has been capitalized through media and its cultural references. Netflix promotes a variety of shows that fail to mirror the complexities and realities of high school relationships. This content has led today's high schoolers to believe that such relationships are recommended. When will I date? Is the inevitable question that everyone asks themselves, and for high schoolers, this question arises when being surrounded with so many promotions of high school sweetheart romances. Today, society capitalizes love, dating, and romantic relationships, creating immense pressure for youth to jump into relationships as soon as the opportunity arises. With all the uncertainty, adolescents are left to wonder if they should seize the opportunity in front of them or put off dating for the time being, often forgetting that God is the start and center of any relationship. Now, before people can answer when the right time to date is, they must first determine what dating is. The term dating emerged amongst the middle class during the 1920s to 1930s, then taking the place of courtship during the beginning of World War II. Even during this time, people felt the immense pressure from their peers in high school to enter romantic relationships, reflecting the same struggle that so many high schoolers still face to this day. As the dating system had evolved long after the war's impact, a shift in dating perspective occurred that changed the practice of dating to an early preparation for marriage by 1950. Although the rate of dating in the US only continues to increase, the rate of marriage has declined significantly since 1960, with the marriage percentage going from 72% to 50% by 2008. The world often emphasizes the excitement of dating, defining it as a casual, non-committed relationship, or what we now call a situationship. Despite the world's loose definition of dating in the Christian context is considered as the stage in the relationship process where two individuals spend time together regularly, learning about one another in Christ, having initial commitment to their partner with the intention of marriage. Although the Bible does not explicitly mention dating, it does illustrate that the most important foundations for Christian romantic relationships are rooted in the purpose of marriage and dating. So for the first question, what's the purpose of marriage? Well, there are four primary purposes of marriage. Number one, mutual support and partnership. Number two, holiness and growth. Number three, procreation and raising godly offspring. And four, reflection of God's relationship with his people. These four purposes stand as the foundations that Christians should follow throughout their lives. Now, adolescence is the phase when individuals often question whether to start dating. According to the National Library of Medicine, adolescence is the period of development from age 10 to 24, with significant growth for individuals physically, mentally, and emotionally. As adolescence is a time for growth and development, it is important to consider how the principles of marriage influence the decisions made during this phase, particularly when it comes to dating. That being said, not only does adolescence pertain to physical growth, it also serves as a time for individuals to grow in their relationships with God and solidify their identities in Christ. While dating in high school can increase the time spent with a partner, it often fails to glorify God and can burn individuals who are not in the position to provide for someone. This is not a call for purity rings or vows like those in the purity movement. This is a call to guide individuals toward dating that glorifies God. Now, why not date in high school? Christians should not date in high school as they lack the foundational qualities needed to fulfill the biblical purpose of marriage. By looking at the lack of maturity, purity, child rearing, and provision in adolescent couples, it demonstrates the problem that so many high schoolers find themselves in by entering these relationships prematurely. Christians should ground their relationships in God, understanding they cannot fulfill the biblical purpose of marriage until they have developed the necessary qualities. Without them, those couples may struggle to prioritize God, leading to temptation, confusion, and a lack of commitment to biblical values. This hinders both partners from growing together in faith and supporting one another and aligning with God's will. Now, when it comes to individuals growing in faith toward marriage, dating early often fails to lead to marriage as it fails to fulfill the biblical purpose of mutual support and partnership due to a lack of emotional and spiritual maturity in adolescence. In a marriage, each partner has unique gifts and abilities that, when combined, form a stronger unit capable of facing life's challenges. While marriage requires mutual support and partnership, those who date early often enter marriages that lack this biblical purpose due to spiritual immaturity. John Piper, a current chancellor of Bethlehem College and Seminary, says, "The point it seems to me that wisdom calls for is to postpone dating until there is a significant measure of life experience and spiritual maturity and a readiness to move toward marriage." John Piper emphasizes here that since spiritual immaturity and limited life experience hinder a readiness for marriage, it is wise for individuals to put off dating until they develop those necessary qualities. Furthermore, not only do adolescents lack this spiritual maturity, they also lack emotional maturity. Statistics reported in 2022 by the CDC for ages 12 to 17 state that over half of U.S. adolescents report discussing their mental and emotional health with a healthcare professional, and that 40% reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness in the past year. Adolescents often rush to enter romantic relationships due to following their fluctuating emotions, leading to possible heartbreaks and unnecessary struggles. Not only that, but these decisions tend to be solely based off selfish human desire, putting God on the side rather than God at the center. Without emotional maturity, not only will adolescents struggle with communication, conflict resolution, and emotional regulation, they may also struggle to establish a partnership that is founded in God. Now, not only does adolescence misshape one's perception, but dating early often misshapes marriages, resulting in failing to fulfill the biblical purpose of holiness and growth, as adolescents are not ready for a sexual relationship and struggle to avoid temptation. A marriage not only grows both individuals, but also serves as a safeguard against sexual temptation, directing sexual activity within the boundaries of a committed relationship. Paul in 1 Corinthians 7:2 encourages a mutual commitment to one another. In a world full of temptations, marriage allows spouses to support one another in maintaining purity. While God commands couples to remain abstinent until marriage, those who date early often fail to follow this guidance as men cannot yet provide for a spouse, making it difficult to avoid premarital sex until these men are able to provide. A study by the CDC states that the percentage of teenagers who had sex in the past 3 months during 2015 to 2019 was 29.8% among females and 24.9% among males. These percentages make dating a legitimate concern. A 25% chance indicates a 1 in 4 likelihood, meaning there's a low but knowable risk of an event occurring. In a time of emotional immaturity, temptation of premarital sex increases for adolescents as they struggle to keep those boundaries and maintain them during the development period of adolescence. It is in man's nature to be attracted to the opposite sex. So even with those boundaries, having such a close and personal relationship to a romantic partner risks overstepping into sexual activity. To avoid sexual temptation, Christians should delay dating in high school and to avoid sexual temptations, to reduce sexual temptation, teens should delay dating in high school to avoid unnecessary early relationships that face pressures such as setting physical boundaries and emotional expectations. By choosing to wait, adolescents ensure that they're in the right position practically, emotionally, and spiritually to enter marriage when the time is right. In contrast to adolescents ensuring they're in the right position to enter marriage, dating early often fails to fulfill the biblical purpose of procreation and raising godly offspring because it leads to unprepared children. Marriage commands procreation and raising godly offspring. This command is key to understanding marriage as it is part of our cultural mandate. God declares this mandate in Genesis 1:28, where the Bible says, "Then God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" This verse reveals that having children is a blessing and fulfills God's original purpose for human life on earth. Raising kids is equally important. God calls us to raise godly offspring in Malachi 2:15, where it says, "But did he not make them one, having remnant of the spirit? And why one? He seeks godly offspring. Therefore take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously with the wife of his youth." Through the covenant of marriage, the couple should bear children to be raised with an understanding of God's ways and become individuals who live according to his will. In relation Well, when parents allow their children to engage in relationships early, it tends to grow without a clear understanding of biblical marriage, which may distort their view of love, relationships, and family. The crucial decisions of today's youth influence the values they pass down to their own children. And by dating early, it creates a cycle that may undermine the biblical principles of family, purity, and commitment. So parents, it must start with you. Parents must consider how choices such as divorce or choosing to live in a single-parent household can have lasting psychological and financial impacts on their children. These decisions shape the environment in which children grow up, influencing their understanding of family dynamics and relationships. In parenting, both the age of birth and living conditions shape a child's perspective and sexual experience. The CDC reports that teens who grew up with both parents at age 14 had a 30% chance of sexual activity compared to 50% to those living in step-families or other family arrangements. These percentages imply that family stability and structure play a role in shaping behavior. Overall, parents should raise their children by exemplifying what a godly marriage looks like. This principle is reflected in Titus 2, 7-8, which says, "In all things, showing yourself to be a parent of good works, in doctrine showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you." When parents uphold these principles, they create an environment where their children can grow up with the knowledge and clarity needed to make decisions that glorify God. Through consistent godly living, parents can raise the standard of marriage and their kids. Through forbidding them from dating in high school, while teaching them the values of marriage, they ensure that their kids are equipped to make decisions that reflect the values of a strong faith-based marriage. In relation to being a godly example, dating contradicts marriage by failing to reflect God's relationship with his people by not preparing individuals to actively provide for a spouse, leading to an incomplete covenantal union. One of the main biblical images of marriage is a covenant. God often mirrors this concept to describe his relationship with his people. God makes this correlation in Genesis 2:24, where he states, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother to be joined with his wife, and they shall become one flesh." God intended the union of marriage to describe the covenantal relationship he would later show with Israel. The two becoming one flesh mirror the depth of commitment and unity God desires with his people. While marriage is meant to reflect God's relationship with his people, those who date early often hinder the fulfillment of this purpose, as men cannot yet sufficiently provide for a spouse, causing a fracture in the covenantal union. When a man fails to provide, it undermines the foundational parts of this union. The Bible commands men to provide for their families, as seen in 1 Timothy 5:8, quote, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." End quote. The Bible clearly states the seriousness of failing to provide, comparing it as worse than unbelief. When high schoolers choose to date in high school, they fail to meet the requirement of provision. If adolescents aren't able to provide and fully commit to their relationships in high school, it makes having a relationship during that time unnecessary. Christians should meet the bare minimum when it comes to their marriage, and by dating early, it often endangers the lives of their spouse and children by the inability to provide the time, the resources, and the maturity to raise their kids. So high schoolers should delay dating in high school to put themselves in a position to provide for a spouse and family, steering clear from falling into a marriage that fails to glorify God. Now, some would argue that avoiding dating during high school can leave individuals without the essential skills or experience for future romantic relationships. Dating is a time where individuals have the opportunity to learn how to handle social skills, romantic social skills, that are exclusive to romantic relationships that friendships alone cannot provide. While some may argue that dating during high school offers valuable experience in building towards mutual or in partnership, it often turns into codependence, showing a lack of self-identity as well as a wrong sense of identity. Codependency is an unhealthy dependence on someone else, completely prioritizing their needs and desires. A codependent person often lacks a strong sense of personal identity, as they may come to define themselves entirely by their relationship. Philippians 2:3-4 goes against codependency, saying, "Do nothing out of self-ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourself, looking not to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And a real-life example of this today is seen through Matt Fradd, an author and broadcaster who brings up the challenge that high schoolers face when time comes to graduate. He points out the pressure to align one's college choice with a romantic partner, leading to a sacrifice of their personal, academic, and future career. He also mentions the alternative, that if the couple chooses to commit to long distance, it is not likely to work out. In either scenario, both individuals will struggle to support the relationship and lose sight of their own individual paths, ultimately affecting their futures and identities. So instead of gaining necessary social skills by dating in high school, adolescents should delay dating and develop these social skills by focusing on experiences such as friendships and personal development in a more free, low-pressure environment. With experience being the main benefit of dating, some parents would argue that they support dating in high school with the help of parental guidance. Parental guidance theoretically does protect the child from making life-changing mistakes. Parental guidance is when parents can advise, set boundaries, and provide support for their children to navigate dating in a healthy and responsible way. While parental guidance can be a benefit for romantic relationships, it often turns into helicopter parenting, which limits the adolescent's ability to develop independence and emotional maturity. Helicopter parenting refers to parents who are overly involved in their children's lives. These parents tend to shelter their children, providing constant supervision, guidance, and intervention to protect them from failure or harm. While the intention is to ensure their safety and success, helicopter parenting stops the development of independence and decision-making skills as they over-rely on their parents. This can be seen through world-renowned psychologist Jordan Peterson, who argues that the overprotection of children today can hinder their ability to develop independence and handle change, resulting in a lack of flexibility during adulthood. With Peterson's argument of parenting, it demonstrates the problem that overprotected high schoolers face, as they might not develop the toughness needed to handle the complexities of relationships or parenthood. Parents cannot shelter their children from the emotional hardships and challenges of dating, but they can delay those challenges until these children have developed the necessary emotional and spiritual maturity, as well as the provision required to handle these difficult relationships. Lastly, some would argue that by putting off dating until later in life, it can place women in a worse circumstance, such as the pressure to marry due to the biological clock. When women wait to date until later in life, they reduce the likeliness of having children as fertility declines with age. According to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, this decline happens faster once you reach your mid-30s, and by 45, fertility has declined so much that getting pregnant naturally is unlikely. With this dilemma, women fear the possibility of having a rushed, ungodly marriage or a childless marriage. While the pressure to marry and have children within a specific time frame is a significant concern, Christian women are called to trust in God's perfect timing. Trusting God's timing is essential to understanding His will for our lives. Although a specific time frame to find a partner and have children can create a sense of anxiety and urgency, Christians should not be afraid. Ecclesiastes 3:1 offers comfort, saying, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." This passage emphasizes how God's plan unfolds in His own perfect timing. Whether that means taking the time to wait for the right person, or developing one's own personal maturity, or preparing for the responsibilities of parenthood, adolescents can submit all things with peace and purpose rather than out of fear or societal pressure. So instead of women dating out of societal pressure, they should instead put full faith in God's sovereignty and timing. So as Christians wonder when God's timing allows for them to date, there remains no specific day or date. However, Christians can display wisdom and evaluate their current situation first before getting involved in a romantic relationship. Christians must consider their ability to support their spouse through mutual partnership, raising godly children, pursuing holiness and growth, and reflecting God's relationship with his people. This means you must be financially stable. You must be emotionally and spiritually mature. And you must be fully committed to the relationship. By prioritizing these factors, Christians can ensure that the decisions reflect the value, their faith, their beliefs, and values. Ultimately leading to the realization that high school is not the designated place to start dating. Ultimately, adolescents should take the time to reflect, develop their identities in God, and seek wisdom before dating to avoid early unnecessary relationships that face unnecessary challenges and pressures, allowing individuals to build strong, meaningful relationships that glorify God from the start. Thank you.
Great work, Aaron. Thank you. I have a question for you. At what point would you say a person is ready? How would you define that readiness? Do you not think that pushing off the dating and marriage age might encourage irresponsibility and sort of an extended childhood, adolescence stage where young adults are putting off responsibility, and how you mentioned establishing the career, that should be prioritized before marriage. How established should people be? There's a trend now toward young people who are waiting till their 30s or 40s to get married, not having children. What is your definition? You have those three factors, but what would you say to people that would put off marriage past college into their career? Maybe they feel like, okay, I need a house, I need this, I need that, and maybe are looking at being very materialistic in all the things that they need before they can consider getting married.
Okay. Well, that was kind of a two-part question. I'll try to answer the second part first about establishing yourself as a person. I believe that, yes, you need to have certain things, such as a house, providing for the long term, not just a job temporarily now that, yeah, you can basically provide for someone for a little bit. You can rent a one-room studio, but then when you have children along the line and you're planning for that, are you setting yourself up in a situation where you'll have enough money to purchase a house in the future, especially in today's inflation?
Are you saying couples need a house before they can have children? They can't live in an apartment?
I wouldn't say that they need a house immediately. I would say that they need to work towards that it needs to be in the plan. Like it says in, I believe, Luke 14:28, does not one first sit down and plan things accordingly before they start building? Because no matter if they start a foundation, if they don't finish it, it ultimately fails.
So, in the beginning, you said that dating is rampant and that the marriage rates are down. I looked a little bit at the statistics because doesn't seem to be what's happening. If you compare dating when I was in high school compared to dating now, it's about half the rate. Nearly half of Gen Z men never dated in high school, never dated, and the marriage rates have gone down, whereas in my generation most people did date and had much higher marriage rates. Are you not concerned that the push of pushing dating till later actually is people are not dating because it's not rampant in our society. Kids are not dating now, not as much as they used to, and marriage rates are down as well. You're not concerned that there's a correlation there, that in pushing off the pursuing a romantic relationship does have impacts on the marriage rate later on?
I think the thing that we forget to account when it talks about people who say they're dating. There are a lot of unofficial dating relationships out there, and I think if we were honest with ourselves, and especially the men, they're gonna say, of course I didn't date in high school. I mean, look at my reputation, it's clean. But if we really were honest about the unofficial relationships that happen today, like situationships, like I said, a casual, non-committed relationship, that is dating, regardless if you wanna say it or not. And if it's on paper of the percentage that, oh, they didn't date, but they did. So
you're saying the definition is different now than it was 30, 40 years ago?
Yes.
That what is considered dating is a different
there
definition?
is a lack of commitment in today's definition of dating. Sorry.
Are you saying a one-night stand is equivalent to dating?
Whoa. I don't. Whoa. Okay, so when
I'm just trying to get the terms clear here because it's like what there seems to be a disconnect then of what the surveyors are calling dating now as compared to when they surveyed people 20, 30 years ago. As you're saying that there's a totally different definition.
I wouldn't say it's a totally different one. However, like I said in my definition, spending time together regularly. So not a one-night stand, but there's a lack of commitment to that relationship to the sense that they could just leave at any point, and there would be no consequence to the relationship, or at most the consequence of breaking up with that person, would be a sacrifice of their time, rather than anything really committing to anything at the start of the relationship, which I think is very important to establish your goals ahead of time when you're pursuing someone.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused because you're saying that what people are doing now is like non-committed type of thing, but there's even less of that, because if that's what they're calling dating, then the numbers are still down for what people are saying, yes, I dated. So I guess I'm just kind of confused as to these definitions, because it's from the surveys, the dating rates are really down for the teenagers and adolescents, and that is impacting marriage rates, which should be a concern for churches and for Christians and for parents who want grandchildren. Not mentioning anyone in particular, but I do have a married daughter. I'm wondering if there's a correlation between encouraging younger people to look seriously at romantic relationships earlier, so that they will then pursue marriage more faithfully than what seems to be happening now.
I think the reason why the percentage of dating has declined so much is because we've declined in what has been standard so long ago. We're lowering our standards as people in our relationships. We're lowering that standard. And the reason why it's going down is because we don't have that standard anymore.
Very good, thank you.
I'll continue on this a little bit. So we talked about the term dating. You also mentioned the term courting in here. So I guess first question, kind of along the definition line, can you just articulate what you intend to mean by dating versus courting, so I'm clear on that?
Right. It's a Christian, in the Christian context, this is how we should date, which may go along the lines of courtship.
And so just so I'm clear, what do you mean by courtship? Just so what does that look like?
My definition of dating, which is spending time together regularly, learning about one another in Christ, and having an initial commitment with the intention of marriage.
Okay, so for you, Christian dating is the same as courtship. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So do you feel like the criteria that you've talked about, the recommendations for how dating should work, what individuals should aspire to before they date, do you think that has been true throughout history? Or is this a cultural moment? Is this a time in history? Because I'll give you one part. You mentioned providing financially for a spouse. Throughout history, people much younger than me and you have provided for families. So is this about today? Or has this always been true?
I think when we look back to the Bible and we see Mary and Joseph, and they were married at what we call 13 and 12, they, obviously in today's society, we have societal institutions that make it very hard to provide at the age of 12 or 13, much less the people that are mature and spiritually mature at that age. I don't think we see a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old have that same kind of maturity. So obviously culture has had an effect on people. We have, as parents, maybe we have, well, not we, well, parents have, parents have lowered the standard of what children should be at a certain age. I believe that we should institute those biblical principles early in our children, and emotional maturity, raising them up spiritually, and bring those values early in life so that although the societal institutions such as like learning how to drive at 16, or you need to be 18 for certain jobs, or like be 21 to drink, which you shouldn't do, but it's because of societal institutions nowadays that we can't have the same, provision isn't the same as it used to be.
That's fair on the financial side. Do you believe, not to pick Mary and Joseph specifically, but do you believe there are points in history where teenagers were meeting the other qualifications that you mentioned? Mature in their thinking, able to have maturity in relationships. Do you believe that was also true at other points in history?
I think it was true at earlier points of history. Today, no.
Okay. Let me go to the other end. Part of your argument is about adolescence, and adolescence you define as 10 to 24.
Yes.
But your thesis is only about high school.
Yes.
Do you also believe that individuals should not date until later than 24, if we take the definition of adolescence? So post-college, maybe a couple years into career. Is that also your recommendation?
I use the term adolescence to emphasize how at an early stage of life, you're still developing. When at the term of high school, I do not believe that individuals meet the requirements of these qualities for marriage. Now, I'm not saying once you go out of college, you're gonna be all ready, but you're at least at this point in stage in high school, you have not, there's not those qualities, requirements met.
I want to question your assumption that time and age equal maturity. I think there's some 17, 16-year-olds that are more mature than other 30-year-olds. I don't know that it's dependent upon age, but I think more upon family upbringing, habits, maturity, biblical, solid spiritual foundation. I think there's a lot of other factors besides age. So if you're just making age the consideration after high school, does it not take into account the many other factors that determine maturity, emotional, spiritual things?
I do believe people mature at different age rates. We can't just say that everyone goes down the long same maturity path. However, the tendency of today's society, the maturity level of most adolescents today, it would be safe to say that most of them do not have the emotional and spiritual maturity, especially spiritual maturity, during high school.
Okay. I'm going to go down a different line. I want to look at if dating or courtship is pushed too far down the line, that it is difficult for believers to meet other believers that are of the same mind and heart, that they know their families. Say you have two Providence families that know each other, that these children have, they've known each other, they know the families, they've grown up together. They have a very secure foundation of relationship. They know exactly who these people are. If a student waits, if an individual waits until they finish college, maybe work for 4 or 5 years, I believe it is going to become increasingly difficult for that person to find a partner of whom they have the same security or the same depth of understanding of their family background, their patterns, their life patterns. I think there's a lot greater depth of relationship between families that you've known as you've grown up, or people that you meet in college than, say, somebody that you meet on a dating app later in life, because it becomes more difficult for people in the workplace, for example, to meet a spouse. How would you speak to that, missing that window of opportunity if you push it off too far?
I'm struggling to get the following of what you're exactly asking, because of, are you asking about their social skills or compatibility with people in general?
I'm saying two families that know each other well, that is a very safe person to marry. You know what the person is like, you know their patterns, you know their upbringing. If you go past college and you try to meet someone in the work, it becomes increasingly difficult the older a person gets to meet a suitable partner. So somebody, say they don't date in high school, they don't date in college, they wait, they're working, they're pretty isolated at their workplace. Maybe they aren't meeting people who are singles with the same beliefs. They have no way to meet them. It could be you meet someone online. So I'm just saying it's easier and safer to meet people at a younger age where you know how that person lives, you know their family, you know those kinds of things. So those relationships are more available at a younger age, where as an individual gets older and older, that it's less, there are less knowns about the people who you might be pursuing a relationship. So there might be issues of past history that are hidden, or there might be mental illness, there might be financial problems, there might be all kinds of issues that these older people have that are unknowns than if you meet someone that's younger, at a younger age.
I think by looking at fear later on in life, because of all these circumstances, we're kind of not having as much faith in God as we should. I believe that if there really are those struggles and those difficulties, doesn't God use that to more point out that you could find a person that God is leading you to, rather than at a younger age you find so many people that are compatible to you? How would you know? And it's more to a degree. We should look at what God has laid in front of us and evaluate our current situation and see, am I emotionally mature? Am I spiritually mature? Is this the right person? Am I the right person at this time for that person? I'd like to question that.
So you mentioned the importance of having the stable finances. Traditionally in society, past centuries, it was not unusual for a man to, develop his farm, build his house, do that. And then because he is a little bit older, he goes and finds the young bride, the young girl. Would you suggest for Christian families to start considering the idea that maybe instead of everybody has to be the same age with each other when they're married, but maybe pushing more towards older, more established men marrying younger women?
That's an interesting question. Okay. I think when we look at the age gaps, I'm going to be very careful. I don't believe that obviously because of how society is, people obviously make a huge deal with age gaps from 18 and 12. And you're going to say, whoa, no. But when you have like 22 and 27, you don't think of it as much as a significant concern. And I believe that is because they're more established people by then. A 12-year-old is not established really established in their emotional maturity, spiritual maturity. Like we look at the 8th graders, and we're not saying that's well established. But at the age of 22 and 27, these people are well off. They have a job. They've experienced the growth throughout of adolescence, and they're established people now.
So it sounds like you would recommend families, not be opposed, or men not be opposed to, if they're going to wait for financial security, to then look for younger women who will then have their biological clock. They still have more time on the biological clock there for families to raise godly offspring.
To a certain degree, I would say.
It follows from the logic of
Yeah.
your argument, because that does push, because if you're waiting for the woman to be established financially, it's going to push against the biological clock.
I believe they should wait until she's established, in the sense that she is ready she's emotionally and spiritually mature, and she is ready to fulfill the roles of a wife. Meaning, and that does not mean only providing in the household in the sense of like providing the food only, but also, not only does she raise her kids, but it also says in Proverbs 31, it also mentions how she is like the merchant ships. She invests in a vineyard. Those abilities, I believe, take time to develop as a woman. And yeah.
Yes, but there are other biological issues for women that I think need to be thought about as well.
Yeah, the fertility rate, like I said, starts declining around your mid-30s.
Why not?
Yeah, sorry.
You're doing really well. Okay, you answered that very well.
Thank you, Aaron.
I'll send you one.
Behind the camera.
All right, if I could have everyone's attention briefly, I do have a more important announcement than most of the ones I make. Because we've run rather long on this afternoon session, we will not be starting the evening theses until 7. So you're welcome to come back at 6:45, but then you'll need to wait for another 15 minutes. So 7 o'clock is when we will pick back up. Thank you.
All right.